I read it for like I saw them comment on it a little bit. I saw them comment a little bit on After Hours or like on Open Bar. So I'm curious about Draker's full take on this. Okay, Saturn's Duck, have a great night. And Saturn's Duck, thank you once again. Thank you so very much. Have a great night. Well, okay, something to bear in mind. Something to bear in mind. The new Running Man that just came out. Okay, keep this in mind. The Running Man that just recently came out is more closely based upon Stephen King's original work than the Schwarzenegger movie. The Schwarzenegger movie, like, deviated significantly from Stephen King's original work. This movie that just came out is supposed to line up more closely to the way Stephen King wrote the original Running Man. So that's when we jump into this, keep that in mind. All right, so let's do this.
You know, I once went on a lad's holiday in Barcelona, and in theory it sounded like an absolutely blinding weekend. We were in a beautiful city with free reign to do whatever we wanted, we had plenty of spending money and a bunch of fun stuff lined up. And you know what? It was a disaster. One of our guys had his passport stolen within like an hour of arriving and had to spend half the weekend at the British Embassy trying to sort it out. Another decided to crash a go-kart into a wall at full speed and fractured 2 of his ribs, and a third man went completely AWOL on the first night and didn't show up again until the following afternoon. And it wasn't even me. Also, it turned out that one of our group was a bit too fond of the old Bolivian marching powder, which was just superb when he decided to have a fist fight with his bathroom mirror at 4 in the morning and almost got us all arrested. The point I'm...
Okay. What have we learned is that Drinker and his buddies know how to fucking party. God damn, my man. I'm like, can I go with you next time? Holy shit!
making here is that sometimes things that look good on paper turn out to be complete disasters in practice. Like The Running Man, for example, a remake of the 1980s Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that promised to be a faithful adaptation of the Stephen King novel it was based on, written and directed by Edgar Wright, a man who gave us the legendary Cornetto trilogy, and starring Glenn Powell, a charismatic leading man who's rapidly moving into A-list territory. When you've got so many positives on your side, what could possibly go wrong? Well, everything, as it turns out. The Running Man is a fucking calamity of a movie. Slow and boring, with all the pace and dynamism of a Chris Stuckman review, a convoluted and meandering storyline that leads to the most rushed and anticlimactic ending imaginable, dogshit level.
Okay. Alright. Hey. So, slow? The original short novel was slow. That's the thing. Yes, correct. Yes, he did, Grumpy. Stephen King wrote the original Running Man. Yeah, he fucking roasted the shit out of Chris Stuckman. Everybody roasts out Chris Stuckman these days. But here's the thing. The original novel, or novelette, I don't even think it was a full-size novel. I think it was only novelette size, is it wasn't a fast-paced action movie. The original Running Man was kind of slow. It was all about him trying to, it was like a short, that's why I called it like a novelette, because it was kind of like a short story. The original Running Man, it wasn't action-related. It was him being sneaky, using disguises, and they tweaked it a little bit in here because in the original novel, he was hunted by hunters. There was people specifically that were trying to hunt him. Whereas in this movie, they're basically getting the entire populace to come after him. So they obviously did some changes. But from the sound of it, they were trying to stay closer to the original source material, which is why it wasn't so action-laden like it was with the Schwarzenegger movie. Now, is that a detriment in this day and age? Possibly.
Storyline that leads to the most rushed and anticlimactic ending imaginable, dogshit level dialogue, an emotional tone that can't decide if it's a gripping thriller or a goofy comedy, and a protagonist with all the depth and charisma of a puddle of congealed vomit. This movie somehow manages to be inferior to the 1987 original in every possible way, and honestly, I can't believe it was made by the same guy who gave us Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Deads. Anyway, somehow I endured it.
My gut feeling is studio interference. That's my suspicion. Is Edgar Wright probably wanted to go a different direction, and my guess is the studio probably interfered and probably told him, no, we've got to go this route. You know, Edgar Wright may have wanted to actually like stick closer to the source material and make it, and make it more like where he's sneaking around, where he's getting clever with disguises and stuff like that. And then the studio probably came in and said, no, we need more action. You know, Glenn Powell's an action star now. So we need a lot more action. We have to get over the top acting. And that'll be my guess is how the studio probably just like fucked it up.
The same guy who gave us Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Deads. Anyway, somehow I endured it so you don't have to. The least you can do in return is listen to me explain why you shouldn't. So just like the original movie, The Running Man takes place in a dystopian future America where the mostly impoverished population is ruled over by sinister megacorporations who keep them distracted with violent and sensationalized TV shows, the biggest of which is The Running Man. The rules are simple. Actually, no, fuck that. They're not simple at all. They certainly used to be because the 87 movie understood the importance of pace and urgency and given the audience a simple objective to focus on. Not so this time. This time, runners have to survive for 30 days on the loose in America. They're given some spending money and a 12-hour head start, and that's it. The catch is that they're not just being hunted by professional killers like in the original movie. Now their real enemy is the entire country. Anyone who
And that's the change that I think fucked this. That's the big change that I think fucked this. Is because, like the Schwarzenegger movie, the original novella, he was only being hunted by hunters, not the general populace. It was just the hunters. And part of the requirement is he actually had a small video recorder that he kept with him, and he had to, I don't even think it was like 30 days. I think it was like a full year. If I'm remembering correctly, I could be mistaken about this, but in the original novella, he actually had to stay on the run for maybe it was like 8 months, but I thought it was like a year. It's a much more significant amount of time than the 30 days. And he had like a little micro recorder he kept with him that he actually had to basically do video diaries with this mini recorder that he would then mail back to the studio so the studio could broadcast them. And the entire time, he basically had to do vlogs. In the meantime, the hunters are still coming after him, and he's got to avoid these hunters for however long of a time it was. And now in the movie, they changed it where it's not only the hunters, now it's everybody's trying to kill him. That's a big part of, I think, why it flopped. Because they shortened the time period, and so of course everybody has to kill him, because if he's just on the run through America and all he has to do is avoid a couple of hunters for 30 days, honestly that would probably be pretty fucking easy. Whereas if he's got to be on the run for like a year or something like that, like in the original novella, the hunters actually have a chance of finding him, especially if he's sending vlogs. So they took steps, it sounds like, to try and make it closer to the novella, but they still fucked it up. They still managed to screw it up by fucking with the formula of the novella.
Who spots them can either kill them or turn them in for a cash reward. Also, they have to send in a tape every day through a magical bullshit Dropbox system to prove that they're still alive. Enter our main man, Ben Richards, a blue-collar worker with...
Is it 30 days in the original 504? I thought for sure it was longer. I thought for sure that in the original novella it was longer than 30 days. Now I could be wrong. I could be getting it mixed up. I thought it was like much longer than just 30 days. Like I thought it was months that he was like spending on the run.
Money problems, still alive. Enter our main man, Ben Richards, a blue-collar worker with money problems who needs medicine for his sick daughter, so he signs up for the games and soon finds himself competing in the Running Man. But before you can say, "I'll be back," his cover gets blown and a kill team moves in to take him out. He barely makes it out alive, but the team are accidentally killed by a gas explosion, and the tape that Richards sends in afterwards to explain what happened gets deepfaked to frame him for the whole thing. Slowly he begins to realise the game is rigged against him, there's no way to win, and it's all just being manipulated by the network's corrupt director Dan Killian to drive up the show's ratings. Faced with a game he's never going to be allowed to win, Richards decides to stop running and go on the offensive, making contact with an underground resistance group that are trying to expose the whole thing, and sets his sights on Killian himself.
So they basically pulled the underground resistance thing from the original movie because, as I recall, evade team professional for 30 days. Okay, man, I thought it was longer than 30 days. I was mistaken. Okay, so I'm mistaken. I thought it was longer than 30 days, but I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Yeah, so the country's incentivized to report him, but not try and kill him. And here they changed it where they can report him or try and kill him to get money. So they had to up the action quotient by saying, oh, you can report him or kill him. And of course, they're going to go the route of trying to kill him. And yeah, so they sort of, so it's like they took the original novella and they took the Schwarzenegger movie and smushed them together and then vomited it out onto the screen. Yeah. So they took the worst part of both franchises and said, here, this is what you wanted, isn't it? Because I don't think that I don't think he teams up with like an underground resistance in the original novella. I think he was pretty much, I think maybe he got like he might have gotten help from a person here or there maybe, but for the most part he was on his own. He had to use disguises. There was no like resistance that he was able to like team up with on this.
But will he finally get his revenge, or is there another twist planned for him? Like I said earlier, most of the right elements were in place to make the Running Man a success. A desperate man forced to risk everything, the paranoia of being surrounded by enemies and hunted every moment of your life, a race against time to stay alive, a sinister corporation willing to lie and kill and sacrifice their own people all in the name of money and ratings, a plucky underdog fighting his way through a game that's been rigged against him and gradually winning over public support, even taking the fight to his enemies by the end. All of that sounds great. The problem is, it's been done already and far better in the 1987 movie. And I'm not trying to defend the Arnold flick as some classic of modern cinema or anything, but it was at least a serviceable story with a novel premise and decent pacing that actually had something to say about the violence.
Well, the Arnold movie was drastically different from the novella. Like it was. Like the Arnold Running Man movie was very fucking different. Like they cherry picked a few tiny things from the original novella, stuck it into the movie, and said it's the Running Man. But by and large, the Running Man movie does not resemble the original works at all. But it was fun. It was fun as hell. And that's what made it great, especially because you had the star power of Arnold to carry it. And a lot of times, when it comes to adapting books translating books into screen, oftentimes, unless you are really careful about it, it doesn't work. That's the problem. Is many times when you try and take a book, a written book, and you try to put it onto the screen, if you keep it as the original story as it was written, unless you are very careful in your script writing and your filming, it won't work. And so that's why very often you see books that are turned into movies that get drastically changed. And they don't honestly resemble much of the original work. You get this with The Running Man. We got it with I Am Legend. I Am Legend was 1,000% different from the original work, so much so that I Am Legend did not even resemble the original book. World War Z, yep, World War Z does not even resemble the original works. What's another good one? Hell, The Crow. The original Brandon Lee Crow movie does not resemble the original comic. Princess Bride, what was it? Ready Player One. Aragon. Like, so many books that get translated into movie don't resemble their original work at all. And if you try, you can try to get it close to it, but you've got to be really careful when you do it. If you want to adhere to the original works, it can be done with a great deal of care. A great deal of care in the script and a great deal of care during filming to make sure that you are still capturing the plot, the emotions, the characterizations of the original story. Very often what you see is these books are basically just used as a broad-stroked blueprint for how to make the movie, and the movie is changed dramatically from the original source material to make it entertaining. The problem, I think, with Blade Runner, at least for some people like the drinker, is they tried to adhere more closely to the book, but they tried to inject facets of the Schwarzenegger movie to make it action, energy, excitement, and it didn't blend well. The two simply just did not blend well, and I think that's the biggest problem that people like Drinker have with The Running Man. Is they just tried they just couldn't get the mixture in properly.
Greed and sensationalism of American entertainment at the time worked in a decent cast of interesting characters that all fit neatly into the plot, and even delivered a satisfying payoff for the hero and villain. And it did all of this in a lean and mean 101 minutes. The 2025 version does none of those things. It's over 30 minutes longer, but it somehow accomplishes less. The plot is flabby and disjointed, meandering from one uninspired set piece to another, and held together by a series of ridiculous conveniences that crop up whenever the writers have backed themselves into a corner. 3 different times in this movie, Richards has to be bailed out by some good Samaritan who turns out to be connected with the Resistance in some way. Wow, that was lucky, wasn't it? And all of this leads to a major...
It'll be super easy. Barely an inconvenience. And herein lies the problem. Is that if you as a scriptwriter for a movie are continually needing to just oh, he escapes this dire situation because the plot demands it, you're not writing a good movie. It's as simple as that. And that's what we see a lot in cinema these days, is that things happen just because fucking plot. Not because it makes sense, not because it does service to the story, not because it makes sense to the story, but because fucking plot.
Problem with pacing. There's absolutely no sense of urgency to any of this movie, and part of that problem stems from the pointlessly extended time frame. Why stretch this plot out over 30 days when you're not actually going to do anything with those 30 days? It could just as easily be 24 hours and it would make for a much more interesting story. Normally I champion movies that respect the source material, but when the source material comes from the drug-addled mind of Stephen King and you're trying to turn it into a fast-paced action thriller, well, changes are gonna have to be made. Like, remember when Stanley Kubrick adapted The Shining and changed 50% of the book to produce one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and Stephen King was so butthurt about it that he made his own version a decade later that followed the book to the letter, and it was a fucking disaster. Well, then you begin to realise that what works in a book doesn't always work
Well, yes, Action Bastard. Maximum Overdrive is another one. But honestly, I'm gonna say it. Maximum Overdrive is fun. Like I've seen the Stephen King like miniseries that he made. It was meh. The Shining miniseries that Stephen King put out was meh. Maximum Overdrive, which is another which is another novella that he wrote that he took charge of for the film. Maximum Overdrive was fucking fun. I love like that movie was great. Well, Stephen King has a cameo in like most of his films, Aki. He usually has like a little cameo in all of them. But yeah, like that was just boy. It was stupid, campy, fun, and it was great. I loved it. I fucking love Maximum Overdrive because it was stupid, campy, fun. The characters were over the top. The action was insane. It was just fun. It was great. I thought it was a great fucking movie. The Langoliers movie miniseries was okay. That's all I can say about it. Is the Langoliers miniseries kind of fits in the same bucket as the Shining miniseries. It was okay, and that's about the best I can give for it. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible, but it was just alright. That's it.
Fucking disaster. Well, then you begin to realise that what works in a book doesn't always work on screen. And the thing is, I expected so much more from Edgar Wright, who used to be a master of high energy, rapid editing, and razor sharp dialogue. Movies like Hot Fuzz are some of the leanest, most efficient scripts you'll ever read, and watching The Running Man, I just can't understand how it came from the same person. Richards just kinda drifts from one place to another.
It's
There's
studio
way too much
interference,
downtime
guaranteed.
and lengthy exposition scenes, mostly telling us stuff that we either know or suspected already, but in the least efficient way possible. There's none of the sharp, witty dialogue you'd expect from Edgar Wright. Everything's so clunky and on the
Yep.
nose that it felt like a movie made for preschoolers, where characters have to keep reminding
Yep.
the audience of what's happening and why. Richards himself explains about a dozen times that he's going to do anything to save his family, as if that wasn't obvious enough already from his actions. On that subject, Richards is a completely wasted character. The script can't decide if he's a loving and compassionate family man pushed into a desperate gamble out of sheer necessity, or an angry anti-authoritarian who wants to tear down the system and destroy anyone who gets in his way. So it tries to juggle them both, and the end result is a character who meanders as much.
God. That's such a bad idea. That was such a bad idea. Like, is he just a family man desperate to do everything to his family, or is he revolutionary? No, because in the original novella, that was made it compelling. He was just a desperate average family man trying to do anything he could for his family, and he had to just operate on wits. He had to operate on his own wits, on his own limited skills to survive. He was not anti-authoritarian in any way. He didn't become anti-authoritarian until literally the end of the novella. And I'll talk about that here in a moment.
Is the plot he's stuck in. I really feel bad for Glenn Powell on this one. The guy's got a ton of likability and charisma as an actor, but it has to be used in the right way, and this movie isn't it. He looks lost most of the time, trying to get to grips with a character that makes no sense, reciting the cringy dialogue without much conviction, and generally feeling like a complete waste of talent. And it's not like he's surrounded by big personalities either. The hunters from the original flick were this rogues gallery of larger-than-life characters that totally fit with the movie's violent game show theme. They all had their own weapons, personalities, and style, and they felt like bosses in a video game that had to be overcome, but there's absolutely none of that here. The hunters are just generic soldiers with nothing to them, and again, I can't believe what a wasted opportunity this was for a guy like Edgar Wright. Even the character of Amber from the original movie, who was right there beside Richards for most of the film, and went from a hostage to a reluctant ally to a romantic lead by the end, doesn't even show up in this version until like the final 30 minutes, and even then the film gives her nothing to do. She's just a hostage,
Why?
and then she literally gets ejected from the movie, and that's it. I hate to keep coming back to
Why even have her in the first place? She wasn't in the novella. He never had. Well, maybe I don't. can't remember if she was in if her character was in the novella or not.
To the Arnold movie, but honestly, everything this version gets wrong about the story, characters, pacing, world building, and setup, that film absolutely got right. And I'm beginning to think it actually deserves a bit more respect than it got. Either way though, you should take my advice and run as far away from this shitty remake as you can. Save your money, save your time, and save your sanity, and go watch something more enjoyable. Like a fucking exorcism. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
And what do you want to bet they pussied out of the original ending? Because, chat, spoiler alert for the novel. All right, this is a spoiler alert regarding the novella. I have no idea if they did this in the movie, so I don't think I'm spoiling the movie at all. But this is a spoil. In the novella, the whole reason Ben Richards did this is for his family. The entire reason Ben Richards does this is to make money because it is a dystopian future, a lot of poor people, the corporations run everything, haha, and he did this for his family. And at the end of the movie, or the novella, the end of the novella has him discovering, like, he's just about to win. He's like at the cusp of that 30 days to win the Running Man and get the prize. And he discovers through the news or something that his family was actually killed in a food riot like days ago. That his family got killed in in some kind of a food riot. His family that he was fighting for on this all died. And so he just says, he basically just has a fuck it, we bowl moment, gets on a plane, takes over the plane, flies it at the studio high rise, and basically the novella ends with right as soon as Ben Richards is about to crash the plane literally into Killian's office. Killian is looking out the window and swears he could see Ben Richards behind the stick, and maybe he was smiling or something. And that's how the fucking novella ends. His family's dead, he dies, and supposedly Killian's gonna die along with God knows how many people in the studio's building. I have no idea if they do that in the movie. My guess is they're gonna pussy out of it. I will bet you anything they will pussy out of that ending in the movie, where Ben Richards loses his family and just says, fuck it, I'm going on a suicidal rampage and I'm killing everybody in the studio, and literally flies a fucking 747 into it. Bet you they puss out of that. Because that might actually be like a heartbreaking ending. So yeah, it's this was it sounds like this Running Man movie, they tried to go, okay, we're going to stick closer to the original novella, but we're going to take a hefty chunk of the Schwarzenegger movie and just cram that into this and call it good. And I'm going to guess that the studio had a massive amount of interference and that Edgar Wright could not make the movie that he wanted to. I will bet you anything that Edgar Wright was basically hamstrung by the studios. And that's why we're not that's probably why Draker didn't see the classic signs of Edgar Wright filmmaking. Is he probably had his hands tied by the studio and they said, nope, we gotta make it like this. We gotta make it like this for the dumb fucking troglodytes that are gonna supposedly fill the seats. Unfortunately. This time. Kind of makes me, in a way, it kind of makes me glad that my book didn't get turned into a show. I don't know if I told you guys this, chat, but there was a moment in time where one of my books was being considered for a series, possibly like a Netflix series. One of my books, Prom Changed Everything, was being considered for something like a Netflix series. They were gonna I was in talks. I was in, I had a telephone meeting with some of the people involved. I did a year contract. Uh and they were going to explore the idea of turning my book, Prom Changed Everything, into a series. Unfortunately it went nowhere. Nothing came of it, obviously. Uh and unfortunately I think it was bad timing because this happened. This occurred right before COVID. Right? They were not representing a network at all, Garrett. This was just like it was a film organization. Uh, they didn't they represent basically filmmakers. They didn't represent an actual network. But it happened like this initiated right before COVID. And so they couldn't, they couldn't find writers to see if they could come up with a script for it. And of course, COVID happened. And so everything basically stopped in its tracks and nothing came of it, unfortunately. But for that brief moment in time, my book was considered for a series, which is pretty awesome. That's the fact that he was even considered, like seriously considered. When I had the meeting on the phone, the people I talked to, they had read my book and they really loved it and they sounded really excited about trying to do a series for it. And I was a little iffy on what they presented, but it's still what could have been. For that brief moment in time, something great, something at back then, something amazing almost happened back then. Oh, well, not in, I'm probably one of a thousands of books that were potentially looked at to be made a movie and nothing came about. So, but it's still nice to hear that something I wrote was considered for a series. Still still nice to hear. Well, Garrett, nowadays I wouldn't be interested. That back then I had hopes that back then I had hopes that it would have been treated well. I don't have those hopes anymore. Nowadays I'm unless it was strictly indie, the only way I would agree to any of my books being turned into a movie or a series is if it was strictly done by an indie company, not a major Hollywood production. It would have to be indie only, because they would actually treat my story with respect. And to me, that's the most important thing. That's what I told these people when we were going through when we were having our meeting. I told them the most important thing is to respect the story. Um, I wouldn't be opposed to it, Atanashi. I don't know how many of my books would be worthwhile as an anime. Like but I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it. Like anime certainly would do a great. I certainly know that anime would treat my work with respect. So I certainly wouldn't be opposed to that. No. Well, yeah, Conga, I never got that far. All the furthest I got was basically just exploratory. That was the most I got was explore. It was an exploratory meeting. They had to, try and contact writers, like script writers, to see what they could come up with. And that's as far as it got. So the only contract I had is that I was granting them permission to, seek out writers to see if they could come up with writers that could put together a script over the course of a year, and that was it. That was the extent of the contract, and it never happened.